Okay. That should be me. Yep. Connie, good day. How are you doing? You know, I got set up with a stream ahead of time so that I could go take the dogs and not stress. And now I feel discombobulated. Done with the interviews. Nice, how'd they go? I'm doing sleepy. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I did a karate class last night. And, yeah, it went well. And, got some sleep. I passed out on the sofa. Yeah, better than I thought you would. Nice. So they were just being lazy with the resumes? Or the CVs, sorry? So I'm just wondering why my dogs are hiding in the crate. Yeah, it was lazy. Nice. Well, home interview. Oh. I think I'm too neurodivergent. Okay. Meaning... Questions were very broad. Hot tea. For the complete thought process. On the second interview, a colleague has joined. That's just detailed special questions where I thought, why? I'd like, hello, how you doing? Welcome in. So when I'm interviewing, I like to converse. I don't like to ask direct questions. And maybe that's the same sort of stuff, right? Where I don't like so what do you do about this? Or how do you do this? I don't like those sorts of questions because they're always putting them on the spot regarding a specific scenario. I kind of like discussion. So, yeah. Oh, welcome in. Thank you for joining. My stuff isn't as cool as Canny's, but do try and write some good code. You join on a day that's going to be a challenge, but yeah. In the opposite side of the world. My stuff cool. That's how to write clean code and create masterpieces in. I wouldn't say masterpiece. That's for certain. I do not weigh content by what you do rather than why you do it. For a friendly Canny input. Thank you. I appreciate it. This is 5 a.m. yesterday. Ooh. That's Charles the mod. Ouch. Okay, so trying to think of the order I want to do these in, make sure they're sensible. I'll probably rearrange them alphabetically afterwards just to make sure that it's the bigger problem going to hurt. So what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of ripping the bandaid off. I'm taking the action that I was kind of scared to do because it's going to have massive knock-on impacts throughout the system. Amal, good morning. Good to see you. Only snack cakes and good vibes. So what I'm doing, if you weren't in the stream yesterday, is I am I'm switching over my entities to use private variables in the background so that I only have public getters. Why would I do this? Because I'm starting to move towards this method-based approach to changing the objects. So there's probably some better terms here. I'm trying to avoid domain-driven in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for the look, Hardlight. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. So as I'm moving towards these, and I've been thinking about this a little bit more, if I do these right, basically, if several fields change at once as part of a behavior, that behavior is better described, right? Why that object is changing, there's a reason for it, right? So but I can't go partially on this approach. I have to go all in or not bother at all. The benefit of it is if I have a handler that loads a planning item, I can't just randomly change the fields of this entity, right? I can't load in a planning item and say, oh, I want to change the description, right? I have to have a reason for change. So if I want to change those fields later, right? If I allow the title and description to be updated, then I'm going to have a method, public void, update description, or update details, right? Which is title, string description, something like that. And that way it's locked behind that wall of functionality. And it also helps me describe the system better, right? My reason for change is clear, right? So I have thought about that, right? I don't know a better way of doing this, right? And this is the way that most people are demonstrating this technique. This comes from Julia Lerman, this method of making this data object. I mean, there's no logic in here necessarily, only the reason it might change, right? So I'm not going to put if the date range is this, that logic will still exist in the domain services or in the application layer, right? It will not exist in these objects. I don't intend for this to say, oh, well, update the user if the review date is in the future, right? I don't want to put that logic in here. Don't like most people, you're binding it to your domains, we pull that stuff out of the service. So, again, I kind of like this pattern because when I save, these events happen, right? If I don't put these with the object, then I have to be responsible for publishing those events in the services, right? So I kind of like this approach because what it means is when I save an object, events publish, and now I can consume those events, and I can actually do all sorts of monitoring and logging without ever touching the actual code that triggered them. Understand? But you have one disadvantage. Okay. You block the way to ever save that stuff without publishing it. Currently, there is no process that needs it. You block the way to ever save that stuff without publishing it. There is no process that needs it. Morning, Esther. How you doing? Well, I don't want to ever save the stuff without publishing. So I don't understand an environment where I would want to save these entities without publishing. Refactor would be annoying. I mean, the refactors are annoying now. Software side data migration, for example. Data migration, I wouldn't use the same objects. Because data migration, I'm not likely to use the actual full service. Again, that's a use case for a use case, right? the code for the use case. I don't have an issue with creating separate code to do mass migration because the objects that I'm using right now are not really for that scenario. But there's no good option here, right? There is no good option, right? If my data models don't have this on, then I've got to wrap many, many layers around that. And again, then you can change the object without actually having something fire. So you could load an object in a domain service and change the value and bypass any sort of triggers. Amal, I'm gonna come back. What happens when the event got sent? You might have missed those streams. So what happens is the entire thing rolls back. So these events in this object are based upon the save, right? So these only actually get published on save, right? If the transaction rolls back, these will not get published because these go into an outbox. These are in a transactional outbox. So these are in flux as well. So only when the full transaction commits do these get actually saved and then therefore published. So that's again why I like this pattern, because it allows me to disconnect the notifying people things changed without actually modifying the code itself. So I don't have to worry in my individual handlers about doing the right thing. All I'm doing here is the fact that I know that it's a data object. Technically, you don't do something there, it's tracking it. Yeah. So all this does is add it into a list underneath, right? This doesn't publish anything. Then when it saves, it then loops through and publishes those events. Right? So this is just holding on to it until it's actually committed. And I get the whole, I don't like this merging of the domain entity and the database object. I don't like it, but it's expensive mapping wise otherwise, right? So I don't believe there's one answer here. I believe I could go many different ways to achieve this. This is the way others are doing it, which means that this is a pattern that I can refer to, and that has some value to it. So all I'm doing here, by the way, is making sure that you cannot accidentally or inadvertently set a value that should trigger something, right? Even if I only do this for now on this, it at least stops and makes me think, why do I need to change this, right? I can put these back as setters if I want to and harm nothing. But I can, this at least prevents me from inadvertently changing something that should fire an event that now doesn't. Because again, don't forget this system will be hooked up to other systems, so it changing matters very much that those other systems get notified the state has changed. So without great deals of mapping and layers on top of layers, etc., I don't see a good way around this. There's got to be an object that looks like this, even if this wasn't the direct object to the database. This is just saving that time. Okay, Amal, you asked, if I remember you have used source generator, what was the use case? Could you please explain? So with the source generator, the way I did that is when I was trying to get the saga for mediator. Oh no, it's mediator extensions, isn't it? Huh? Mediator outbox, mediator sagas. There you go. So basically, this was so you could chain these events together and have them published. But what I didn't, so I had a case where actually there's some testing here, right? And Saga is started by message. So I wanted to use the notifications and create a Saga. So Saga is a long-running process that happens after many events, etc., right? So as these notifications were being published, I wanted to capture them, and when several had happened, trigger another notification, right? It still might be useful, by the way, as we do things. And the source generator came in because I didn't want to have to create a handler for every event I tried to build the Saga out of, to then just forward it straight to my Saga. So I created a source generator to basically generate, the examples won't be here, right? No, they won't. Sample code. It would basically generate a handler. That has to be. SQL persistence of it. Templates. Resources. Here you go. So what it would do is it will create a class and fill in all the details and then generate this class. So then it'll get the notification. If that's not flagged as an orchestration notification, then it fails out. Because you need to have something to identify all events for the same object, so you need an orchestration identifier. And then it will fetch that Saga, if it can, from its persistence. The persistence, again, is abstracted out so that the SQL version of it is the implementation right now. And then it will call handle on that Saga with that notification. So it chains all these things together. So the source generator was used for building these out. I think I have some more lessons to learn on source generation. This kind of failed. It stopped working. But then again, I didn't need the Sagas, as it turns out, because I had a different solution. This still might be necessary. And the idea is that when the Saga marks itself as complete, this will also clean up the Saga and delete it from its persistence after it's published its complete event. So yeah, that was the use case. So if you want to go and look at it, it's the mediator.sagas library on my GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. So yes, I do agree that the mixing the data model and the domain model, and I really don't like using the word domain model because it starts to get into that world. I'm not doing aggregates. I'm not doing DDD specifically. Mixing them is not good, right? But right now I'm doing the most amount to make sure that I can protect these objects and make sure that the events that I need to fire in the system are being fired. Wait a while, anytime. So Entity Framework does have the concept. Yeah, no worries. And if you have any questions, if you want to ping in the Discord, feel free. And the source code is all there. You should be able to check it out and run it if you need to. So Entity Framework does allow itself, it does allow access to private member variables. Say it. My earphones are, they're tight fitting, and it makes me very conscious of my voice, so I have to pull one of the actual rubber stoppers off to balance my voice out so I can I don't listen to myself. I don't listen back to myself. Some people listen to their own voice as they're streaming, and I can't do that. It will distract me. So yeah, the entity framework as a concept, it can bind to private fields. So that's what this is doing, right? It's saying, hey, you need this property. This is the field it's going to be backed by. So it will now bind these, and I've tested this. And now, when the entity framework deserializes this object from SQL, it will map the right fields, right? And again, Julie Lerman, who has done a lot of this stuff, is one of those people that works with Steve Smith, Ardalis, on a clean architecture and stuff. Has created many Pluralsight courses. That's a pattern she put forward. I found a video with her doing this. So, planning items is the easiest one, right? There's very little impact across the system. This will now load, so when the context, well, it won't load just yet. I have to override on model creating. Model builder dot apply configurations type of I'm going to get our assembly right now. Filter, good morning. How you doing? Really good. Good to hear. So yeah, that will apply that configuration. And again, I'm open to learning new ways of doing this sort of stuff, right? Some of this stuff is new to me anyway, in terms of the structuring and the organization. What it has opened up is, and I think I want to look at this pretty soon as well, is the whole open telemetry concept, right? So I can put, using this method, I can put behavior pipeline on Mediator, and I can create a pre-processor pipeline and a post-processor pipeline, or even just a logging and tracing pipeline behaviors for these events, which means that I don't actually have to change my core code. My application services, etc., don't need to change. So I really think there's a great advantage to doing it this way. Because I always stop when people are like, did you add logging? And I know that it's for a lot of people, adding debug statements is a valid way of, logging statements is a valid way of debugging an application. But it always sits wrong with me to change my code to have extensive logging throughout it, right? At least with this method, I can actually put methods in there to see the behavior of the system. I can put a set of behaviors in there just for debugging purposes, right? And I can put a set of behaviors in there for production purposes that publish out to logging systems or publish out to OpenTelemetry, etc. So I can start to think more about these things without changing the core code. You'd think so. You'd think so. Well, too many people use logging. I agree. Well, even at production level, right? I think you should stop. Every time you get to add a log statement, you should stop and think, what is the value of adding this log statement? What does it actually tell us, right? Because I've seen so many applications where, you go into a service and it will be, okay, log info starting handler, log.info assigning user, yeah, and they're using it as debugging, right? And those statements get left in there, all they intended. So I think before you write a log statement, you should 100% stop and think, why am I logging this? What value does it tell me? And is it temporary? Is it temporary? I was going to say, is it temporarily? And then I stopped myself and thought, no, I want temporary. Right, but if something fails in prod due to scaling or whatever you want to know, right, so how do you give yourself the best indication that you know that, right? Logging failures and async calls, yeah. So I'm not saying logging is useless, I'm just saying logging is something that you should tackle as a strategy rather than a fix-all tool. And what the eventing piece of this does for me is I can now, because I'm sending a command, I can put a behavior in there, and I can put a development behavior and a production behavior in there very easily, right? Thank you for the follow, Dear Dragon. Welcome. Hope you're well. I can put behaviors in there that log this stuff without actually touching this code now, right? Which I think is of great advantage. And because I'm publishing events when things change, right, I can capture those publishers. Even if I don't consume them, I believe I can still capture the publishers. So that's an advantage as well, because now I can actually see my system working without actually touching my system, with the core of my system, right? So I'm going to continue this pattern, but I think very soon I will turn around to do some of that monitoring stuff and see if I can't put some tooling in place sooner, because then I can just log things to Seek, right? And on a local environment, I can have it streaming all the events I want it to stream. So essentially I could say, okay, well, I see that I triggered the, I sent the update planning item command, and that triggered the assigned user changed, it triggered the review date changed, and triggered the something else, right? But I can see those events in the Seek, and just the fact that they're logged with minimal data would allow me to go and review, oh, well, that triggered this, this, and this, so why did it do that? Right? That's valuable debugging, but I don't need to add it into my actual application. It's there because of the nature of what we're doing. So that's where I see this providing the most amount of benefit. Okay, so planning items. Passing events around is a disadvantage in that they could fail, and handling the fail is simple. Passing events around is a disadvantage. Everything could fail. Well, I'm not sure what you mean passing is a disadvantage. Well, in this instance, failure, what does failure mean? Right? So, don't forget, these events that I'm talking about are notifications from within Mediator, right? And whether you agree or not, right, I outbox them, right? Do you understand? Right, but the outbox pattern is fixing a problem you created. Okay. Fixing a problem I created. That's an interesting way of putting it. So you don't consider the outbox pattern solving a problem. You see it as fixing something that I could have avoided. Solves the problem, right? But what am I making? But if you pass stuff through variables, you don't have the problem. Pass stuff through variables. So, I assume you're remembering the scenario correctly. So the reason for this, and I want to make sure that I'm validating my decisions here, right? I don't want to just proceed forward with the system design that I feel works, but others see issues with, right? That's just arrogance on my part if I just move forward without appreciating that there could be something I've missed in that path. If there were no microservices, you didn't have everything. You'd pass things around in parameters, variables, etc. I guess all I'm getting at, you want to minimize the number of microservices events. Right, and you can't. Okay. Well, in this instance, this wasn't even a side effect of a microservice. This was an instance of just organizing code into the right pieces, right? So if you consider the handle as microservices, then sure, but you don't want to do too much, right? In this instance, I had several things that need to happen, right? I need to first register my tenant. I need to register my user. I need to associate that user with that tenant, and I need to then register that user with the provider, right? All these things need to happen. Now, if any one of these first three pieces fails, I don't want any of that information left around, right? So the events that get published from these things happening should also not have happened, right? So yeah, of my own making, I suppose. But I don't see necessarily in this instance, short of making everything one big service that knows about everything, any cleaner way of doing that, right? I don't consider, I mean, it all comes down to what you consider one thing, right? If one thing is registering the organization, then yes, this all could go in one handle and that problem wouldn't have actually occurred because the events would only have fired when everything's saved. Well, this isn't Kafka. Nothing in here is Kafka. This is all local service stuff. This is Mediator. This is local service. That's using just internal lookups, right? So it's all code gen, so that's not going to work very well. But ultimately that is, hey, I've got a service for this. There you go. That's Kafka. That's a different outbox. That's not the notifications outbox. And that isn't implemented in this yet, actually. I haven't implemented my Kafka library here yet. So there's no outbox right now. This publishes straight to Kafka. That connection. Right. So that connection, that is, I mean, you could call method on a facade. So you would say that there should be a harder link between tenant management and tickets, and you don't need the service in there. Right. So it is, yeah, okay, it is another option, yeah. And actually one we're going to explore, right? Because if we go to the diagram, right, I'm going to create an internal API, which is exactly what you're saying, essentially, right? This is a method call, right? And that's kind of, when we discussed the service bus thing, that's kind of what we talked down to, right? This to this is a kind of hard link, though, because it does, when you put that internal API in there, right? So tickets to planning items, what do you lose by using different messaging in the two sections of code? Right. I mean, so by putting an API in there, right? So planning items gets an internal facing API that tickets can use, right? So now when ticket goes to send that event, if planning items isn't there because that service is down, we have a challenge, right? What do? Do we schedule it? Do we do anything else, right? That's why a service bus or Kafka, etc. comes in handy, because those messages can be published. And as long as this is able to publish, then planning items when it comes back online can consume those things, right? Whereas with an internal API, that is a failure point that I have to handle. Right? If that isn't available because that comes back with times out whatever, then that planning item, because that planning item service is down for whatever reason, right? That API is not available because tickets is trying to communicate with it. What do we do with tickets? So we've got to come up with something there to solve that problem, right? Yeah, independent deployment is a very big advantage of more microservice architecture, right? But you've got to build resilience in there. There's a lot more when you start to build an application in a distributed manner. The challenges expand. I'm not sure exponential is the right word, but they do expand significantly beyond simple application development, right? Right. Yeah. So when we've got multiple services, you can actually have teams working on specific components. There's still coordination challenges, right? But that independent deployability definitely is a massive advantage of multiple services. You could also divide the two code bases. Well, again, so right now, this is one solution because it's easier for me. That's why these tasks are carried out with asynchronous communication. Internal APIs are generally not used for commands issues. Yeah, and I'm only going to implement the internal APIs temporarily, right? Because it's way less cognitive load than the alternative, which is to try and implement a more complicated system, because I do not want to use Kafka for essentially command-based cross-service communication. Yeah. Why these tasks are carried out with asynchronous communication. Yeah. Because again, so if you have an API that just passes messages, you won't do any commands. An API that passes messages. I'm not sure I follow that one. Right. I mean, these APIs would only be point to point, essentially. I'm not sure I follow. Oh, yeah. One thing I was thinking about while I was walking last night was this data flow as well. And I apologize. So anyone new to the stream, obviously this is a more complicated project. It's not something simple that you can just dive into. But feel free to ask questions, right? It might not look beginner friendly, but it doesn't mean you can't learn something from it if you are a beginner, and if you are not, and you're interested in what we're doing, I'm happy to explain more and dive into more. One of the things I was considering last night was the whole data availability. So yesterday I kind of pointed out, I kind of drew these arrows on here to highlight that what I wanted to do was some form of view. So when it comes to the client is built off of a combined view, which means that I can put more GraphQL stuff ahead of it, in front of it. Then I thought about this publishing concept. Sorry, I just need to, how do I? Okay, my apologies. Apex, good morning. Hope you're well. See, for a small project with a single dev doesn't need me. I think it's not healthy to send commands by asynchronous communication. You can't follow the lifecycle of the command. You don't know if the command is actually completed, it's processing in the background. I see, for a small project with a single dev doesn't it make more sense to have a monolith that is structured in that manner? Modules, monolith. For a smaller project, if you're building an application that is a to-do list thing, right? You don't want to break it up into services. Absolutely not. If you identify that there are components you need to build, yeah, there's a point. It's easy to feel out, right? I'm not over-engineering this just because it's easy, right? Or I'm not overthinking this. I am building this because I want to build an application. I know there are different components. Maybe these components, we've already gone through work items was going to be all of these things. And then I realized that would get too big. And there's a definite benefit in having these broken up because the behaviors of each piece of the system can actually be then tuned to those behaviors, right? Tuned to the application. So tickets doesn't necessarily need sprints, right? Tickets just needs a Kanban board that's relevant and but still has the concept of items progressing through states. Planning items have kind of states that are beyond a board, right? So there's extra data that attaches to a planning item that helps move it through a process. Stories work in sprints. Planning items, again, could be Kanban. It could be a sprint. You could kind of align a sprint with an actual story sprint. But this flexibility gives me the ability to say, hey, these have different behaviors with different decoration. I'll get to the data point in a second. It was in some of these completely different. Sorry. I gotta read this, A, because I'm looking more at the camera, and B, because it does combine the chat, so if anyone on YouTube speaks as well, I don't miss that. I also use CQS in monolith, and I design it to be a modular monolith. Because there are things that depend on the structure of your project any time. 3 microservices is not over-designed. Yeah, because, again, it depends on what you label microservice, right? Some people would say that, not the database. That would be this one. Some people might put this behavior behind a microservice, right? If you think of a Lambda function as a microservice, right? And then you can compose your system that way and everything's modular. But I think that's one layer of complexity too much for my scale of development, right? I.e., one person this is manageable, right? I can cognitively manage this. I can move between the components because I'm following a pattern now that is more consistent with other frameworks. I can actually learn something from those frameworks as well. And I can move between these components pretty effectively. I know, hey, I need to send a command. Where's that? Oh, well, that'll be in the application. I can follow those patterns. So the system design has to grow, but I can cognitively manage it. I have to leave you for now. I'm sorry. Have a nice stream. Ezra, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it as always. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for the active discussion. It's fantastic. Appreciate it. Of course, there are things that depend on the structure of your project at this time. Yeah. To derail. You'll find that tweet interesting. wonder if I can. The viewer monetization flow. Discovery, familiarity, engagement. Okay. Yeah. I think that very much depends on who you are, right? I'm not giving up my day job to become a Twitch streamer. That's for certain, as a dev streamer, right? That's I do need to do more on this to help supplement the stream component there. This discovery-wise, I think the natural discovery of the stream is okay. Yeah. Interesting view of it, though. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, my goal right now is very much, I do want to treat this as a real product. I want to put the effort in that I would to an actual, to an employer, right? I'm thinking about all the same things. I'm developing the code in a similar manner. I'm trying to be good on the practices, but be pragmatic about moving forward with it. Yeah. Hi, Dragon Spirit. Welcome. Thank you very much for the follow yesterday from Captain Coda. Appreciate it. Welcome. So, to introduce myself to anyone new to the stream, it looks like there are a few more newer numbers in here. I am a .NET developer. I've been a .NET developer for quite a while. And right now, this project that we're working on is a personal project. I aim to make it an actual product, so this code is not openly available, but I do work on it on stream from time to time. Well, several days a week. And it is aimed around agile project management. I often find that there are problems with that process, and I feel that I have some ideas on how to improve it. So I am investing the time and energy to see if I can't make those things come true. Right now, I'm focused very much on the API and the code design, but then moving to the UI, etc. Eventually. I also work on a viewer project. So we have a couple of days a week, we do a stream on Water Drink Water, which is a project we kind of have started a couple of weeks ago, where the aim of that is all the code is shared. We can go through things like this, but everyone has access to the code, and we can experiment and do PRs against it. Is there somewhere to read about your thoughts on things that could be improved in the process? No, but I probably should put them down somewhere, right? I actually, Tick Tick pointed out my blog site was unavailable last week. I realized that it expired, and Azure never told me. So I ripped it all down. So I need to replace that. I feel like a lot of the issues are outside the platform itself, like human-based versus tech-based, so I'd be interested in reading more about your thoughts. Okay. Yeah. I can, my feelings might be anecdotal too. No, I mean, it does make sense, because, again, supporting what I'm saying and what I believe through just the software is probably not enough. I never consider... It's funny, I've streamed for several years. Right? Obviously, I've got back into it pretty heavily right now, and I never consider what I have to say particularly revelationary or worthy of actual further attention. So I never think to capture those things. But I realize I do have some takes that might help people who are earlier in the career improve things. So it's kind of the point of why I'm streaming. So, yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll try and get something together. I mean, in general, communication is the biggest thing, right? It's how do we communicate is the sticking point. And how do we know where we are with things? Again, through communication. I'm here for the discussion, a little bit of tech improvement. The discussion is always good. Yeah, there's been some good active discussions, especially of late. I need to mute again because I'm going to blow. I certainly hope not. But it definitely sounds like it, doesn't it? I didn't realize it was as stuffy when I started the stream, so my apologies. Let's see if that helps. Take out the headphones. I'm here basically also because I like to see different people. Well, I appreciate you being here, Dragon Spirit. It's appreciated. So, okay. We've kind of gone on a bit of a derail. But what I'm working on right now is a bit of a refactor because this is my goal in the short term, right? So right now when you work in something like Jira, you create a card, a story, whatever you want to call it, you tag it with a type, story, task, spike, etc., depending on what you've configured on your system. And that card sits there, and it hopefully you pick it up, you point it, you put it into a sprint, you work on it, and then you complete it, and the work's done. What I'm trying to do is introduce some sort of workflow to that. Rolf. Hello, how are you doing? So that's what this diagram is representing, and obviously some of these are thoughts and ideas as to how I might achieve certain things in the short term. Oh, that's what I was going to say before. I was thinking about this on a walk last night about the data. So I know that there are people that disagree with the whole concept of distributing data across your system, right? So having multiple copies of data. There is a concept called a single source of truth, right? One system can only own one piece of data, right? Doesn't mean that data can't be shared elsewhere. So if I have a ticket, I can publish that ticket, and other people can see that a ticket exists. But they don't get the rights to change that data, right? You need to know where is your single source of truth. You're doing fantastic. Just got this week's major task done, and it's frankly it's really cool. Nice. Hey. I appreciate you being in here, but I get it. It's easy to lose track of things when things are going well. So awesome. Congrats. Yeah. Nice. So, yeah. In terms of data sharing, right? These lines here I should kind of mark as dotted in some way, shape, or form because they're really kind of thoughts rather than actual idea. An idea. It did get me thinking this concept of publishing this information out for view only. Instead of publishing these events and consuming them in the I don't think I'm going to win this today, but we'll have to see how long I can go now. Instead of publishing the events and having each system consume them, so that like the ticket or the notes, etc., in this process, what would happen is the tickets, when you promote a ticket to a planning item, it would start publishing that information. Until then, you don't need to, so you don't publish it. But then that information could be consumed by this system and store that ticket and note information in their own storage. That means that when they get, when they need to access it, they don't have to say, hey, can I have this data? They've got their own copy of that data. It's just read-only as far as they're concerned. But it did get me to thinking about the whole view concept in terms of, do I need to publish a specific object and get it consumed by multiple systems? Or can multiple systems have read-only access to the view, right? So they can query, hey, this ticket, right? So it's a thought process right now. And, I'm kind of going to exercise that a little bit as I can and see if it is something that is worthwhile, because then these don't need to have their own data stores necessarily. There is only one data store of everything, and this can query what it needs. Maybe that's overkill, maybe that's something that would overcomplicate things, but it is something that I want to consider. Cold is going around, huh? I have sinusitis and it makes me cough my brains out. That made for an interesting stream last Monday. Yeah, I think for me it's more I'm tired. I'm a bit worn down. I've been doing long days and but yeah. It gets too difficult to talk because I'm just stuffy. It gets too difficult to talk, then I'll have to finish up. But if it's upsetting anybody, let me know. This whole I'll do what I can. Yeah, I'm definitely. Yesterday started at 4:20 in the morning with dog walks, and ended at 10 o'clock last night. So it was and then started again at 5 o'clock this morning. So I'm a little tired, I think, which is definitely leaving me more susceptible. But we'll see. Tell you what, I'm gonna go on BRB. I'm gonna raise the desk so I'm standing, which will help me a lot. So I'll be right back. Okay, that should help me a little bit. Right, so what am I doing today? That might be wise to get on with this. Considering the refactoring. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm refactoring my entities. So right now, good or bad, agree or disagree, this is what I'm doing. The entities that go in and out of the database are where I publish events from, right? So that when they change, I know to add an event to the system to say, hey, this happened, and then I can do more with that. right? I might publish an integration event. I might do all sorts of stuff with that. What it means is that I'm using the same model that I read and write from the database to do this thing on, right? And if I'm going to do that, I have to protect the variables. I can't just allow public get setters, because then if I allow public get setters, I could, but someone else coming to work on the code with me could also just go and change a field and have no impact, because it doesn't publish the right event. So I need to guard against those things. Also, by doing this, it does make me stop and think about why I'm making a change, because I can't just change a value, right? So I have to add a method to change a value. So why am I doing it? What is the reason for change? So yeah, let's go with that. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and changing these entities to follow this pattern. Now the reason these are complaining and it's good is because these are these fields specifically are actually related to the entity base, which I've already changed. So I've already created the configuration for doing this. I just need to go through all the entities, make the changes, then identify all the code that changes these fields in a property get setter, and either decide whether I need to add an event or something else. So update planning item, add configuration for a framework, modify EF context to load configurations. Like that. Yes. So let's move on. Right. So for each of these, this is time consuming, but it is going to be worth it in the long run, I think. So I create a private string line 1, right? Then I swap this out. So this is only ever a getter now, right? You can never just change this property. Line 2. And I am putting them together, right? There's probably different ways people might lay this out. I could do this alphabetically, but then these are kind of objects that are commonly grouped together. So, Copilot, help me out. There you go. There you go. So now everything below here will be broken, right? Because I'm now hot. So what I need to first do is this. Now, this create and this constructor look almost identical, right? These go in here now. And again, I can't set the public property, so that's fine. There's probably an easier way of doing this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to find that right this second. Right. Non-nullable fields are initialized. Non-nullable fields. Oh yeah, I didn't mimic that behavior, did I? So it's allowing me to at least review the objects that I have right now, review my use cases for the data. It's got an address, and now this is new address. On building line 1. Oh, I did it. There you go. I'm being lazy and letting Copilot help me out there, but this cleans this up. Now this domain event can be added, and I can publish it. So what I'm doing there, for anyone who's not seen this before, the ID of the table is the ID. The identifier is a shareable GUID that is able to be passed around the system, because that entity, even if I change the underlying data store, if I have to re-import data, etc., should stay the same. So it's a consistent ID identifier that would stay with that object no matter what version it is. Yeah, internal versus external. So I'm visibly differentiating by using the word identifier rather than just using ID everywhere. There is some other ways of doing this. I could create an actual ID object for each thing. So an address ID would have something there, but yeah, I don't need to worry too much about that one. So there's address. So when address changes in my application, I do need to make sure that cases, users, doing data migrations after you give the client your internal DB keys is a nightmare. Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah. So register tenant async. Hello, bro. What do you mean the ID key changed? Yeah. Yep. Huh. Method has 9 parameters, which is greater than the 7 authorized. Thank you for the look, Apex. Appreciate it. Interesting. We'll come back on that later. But go to implementation. So the address here is fine because I'm not changing anything else on the address, so it's fine. Okay, so continue down. Next entity. Tenant. This is probably going to be a bit more painful, but we'll see. So again, private string name, and then replace that with name, private GUID identifier. Blah, 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 blah. No, that's probably there. Private bool verified. Not sure about whether I should use is there, but right now they are fields that aren't being used, so I don't think there's great value in overthinking that. And again, I go to lowercase these because I can no longer touch those property versions. Tenant, new tenant, and there we go. Right, so associate address. Well, this is one advantage of having the associate objects as well. My method on here can hide the fact that I can add a tenant address. There is no tenant well, I could create one manually. That's a harder one to hide. But that's not a base entity, so this doesn't actually matter. That's not an object you touch directly. So let's do address, date, address, or pattern. Date tenant. Actually, now the fact that I'm not seeing a lot of challenges on the errors wise side of things suggests that I've got some things right. Tickets looks like it might be more of a challenge. But from a tenant perspective, it looks like I've not really done anything that's beyond those initial methods anyway, so I'm safe right now. I could overcomplicate the commit message, but ultimately that's all I'm doing there, so yeah. Tenant user. Tenant user is an entity, but tenant address is not. Interesting. I think I'm going to take the chance to standardize that. So, the tenant has tenant addresses. Also has tenant users. So let's do public void associate user, right? Tenant users to add new user. The responsibility of not user. Actually, I don't think that needs to be in. I have to do it this way. This is messy. I've made a mistake here. This would be the right way to do it, I think. Tick tick. Hello, how are you doing? I think that would be the right way. I think that's an impossible way right this second, and I have to review how I use tenant users. So I publish tenant user, and a tenant user has an ID so that I can link to it, and then I can refer to the tenant user by its identifier, sorry, down the line. Maybe I don't want to do that. Currently implementing mass transit into gems. We're working on making the platform less dependent on Azure, just in case we don't get the credits upgrade, you know? Ooh. That's a rough possibility, but I think, yeah, very worthwhile doing. Right. Well, we should look at that one. How difficult is mass transit to implement as your, I mean, your stuff's pretty clean, so I would imagine you are. I mean, it's never a swap out, a direct replacement, but you've got to be close, right? Come on. Not winning with these glasses today. So I'm trying to consider what this means, right? Tenant user. Tenant address doesn't matter as much because I'm not using it. Do I need to care about tenant user so much? When I'm creating a ticket, I have a user identifier post. That is my user identifier, which is my user. I don't have an association. We have like 6 places using queues at the moment. It's not hard. Better now than when we start using upload updates and stuff. Yes. That's the same approach I'm taking here, right? I'm maybe doing a little bit of over engineering, but I know there's things that I need and things I don't need, and I'd rather do it when it's smaller than when it's larger later. So I have the user identifier there. That user identifier there is my sure I published that message before. So my apologies if you're in ads. This is the user identifier of my token Malt0, which is my actual user. The only thing tying us to Azure after this is the image blob storage. Apart from that, we really are fully mobile if that's a word you can use about Kubernetes clusters. Yeah, I have tinkered. I got a version of my game library working across a Kubernetes cluster locally, and that took me months. That's actually why I stopped streaming for a while because I couldn't do it on stream. I'd drive myself crazy. But all my spare time went to doing that. So that's why I'm worried about this one, because I don't want to do that learning on stream. I don't think it'll be beneficial. I don't think it'll be interesting. And I don't think anyone's going to watch that. Might sound cool, but it's really not when you start doing it. So why do I tenant user receiver? I don't need tenant user. No, I do. Yeah, setting up a local dev cluster in the office on my old PC, hence I'm also offline because we're just doing price reducing work by setting up local stuff. Yeah, being able to do it locally as well will help you in the dev, because then you don't have to stress about the costs. Yeah. I know what you meant. So I do need to publish the tenant user, right? Because it's the association with the tenant and the user. I need that information. It doesn't matter. So that tenant user is a published item. So this has to be an entity by virtue of it's a primary thing. Whereas the address right now is not. I don't publish this anywhere else right this second. I don't have a need. I probably will have to change that later, but I'm not going to do it unnecessarily. But this has to stay as is. Just validating that I understand my own system. No, private in. Just randomly just dropping curly braces in there. And those are virtual associations anyway, so that's fine. I don't know if you need setters on that. I don't know if it'll imply it, but okay. So user ID, tenant ID, identifier, and they added. I could probably cut these out by using the base constructor. Right. Added, protected, entity base, identifier equals grid.newGrid. They added equals 8.9.utc now. Now that is burying something deep in the bowels of the system, right? I have no dependency injection on this, right? And that's another downside of doing this, right? I can't control the date times. But this does mean that I can kind of do, that's implicit anyway, right? But now I don't have to keep repeating that effort, right? For what I'm doing right this second, the entities themselves, I don't really care. I'm happy doing within a unit test, I'm happy doing is within 5 seconds or something like that. I might want to review that later. But again, I'm not going to overthink whether one is active and is verified versus active and verified. That's just overthinking at this point. L, and I don't need them to because that's the default. The base. Okay. So my tenant management components are there. Do my test run. Will it build just tenant management? Yes. So all my tests pass still. Doesn't mean anything. My test could be utter rubbish. When tenant doesn't exist with name and no association exists. I probably need to flex these tests a little bit more. There's a lot more in there that I've just changed that is not covered. Modify entity base to set identifier and date added. Update tenant user to follow pattern. Update user to follow pattern. So now we need the configurations for those things. So in my infrastructure configuration, address configuration, we don't need that, but builder property P goes to P dot. So this changes, right? So I have an entity base type configuration of address, right? Now builder dot property P goes to P dot. ID and identifier are taken care of by the base class. So line 1 that has field line 1 and rinse and repeat. That's guesswork, by the way. That's not knowledge. City, town, or village. City, town, or village. State, province, or region. Sublocality. Postal code. country ISO code. So again, those are these private fields, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. Get rid of that. So that's my implementation. Tenant configuration. Change it a little bit more. Entity base type configuration of tenant. And we can move all this into there. That. Okay, so this is defining those relationships, right? Tenant addresses, tenant users, etc. Name as field, name. Not sure how I feel about that. I don't know why I've done that, but don't need identifier. That can actually go into here. Ah, no, it can't. Oh no, it does. I have it. I don't think this actually does what I want it to do either. So I don't think it's actually necessary. Has new ID will work on a migration. So if I start to use migrations, if I have that there, when the migration generates, it will say that there's a default on that column. However, that's not respected when you actually create an entity framework, and being that I have a default on the base entity of new GUID is irrelevant, so that's fine. So these are not necessarily, because I'm not using migrations. So these might actually not be required. Good. So there's 3 fields on the tenant. There we go. What are you complaining about? You're complaining about a missing curly brace. So if you have questions, if you're watching what I'm doing and you do have questions, thoughts, opinions, etc., don't be afraid to share. It's okay. If you are a new coder looking at this, it might look intimidating, but I'm more than happy to stop and answer questions or review this. Do not need to be productive. I don't like the idea of, so I get the idea of migrations. Right now I'm not working on the concept of migrations. I'm writing scripts for everything. That's easy right now. That'll get a lot harder the bigger the system gets. And if I have to then start to worry about data migration, those are going to get harder. Putting these in here kind of hides some validation stuff. Also, it doesn't get used by the code, it gets used by the migration builder. So I'd rather have migration configurations over entity configurations and separate them out. And I don't like using attributes. Verified. Kind of useless in that, but yeah. Okay, so that's, we need user. Oh, we got user. We need tenant user. And that's it, right? Because at tenant address does not at this point have a entity base. And user configuration. Entity base type configuration of tenant user. Builder.property. P goes to P dot user ID has field user ID. The biggest challenge to this is because I've changed so much. I don't know if it works yet, right? And I won't know if it works until I actually change everything. So yeah, add relevant configuration, relevant. I'm going to push it off my machine at this point because it's, yeah, kind of hefty. That's tenant management. All done. This is where it gets a little harder, I think. Because I think I've got more behavior wrapped in this. I think this is going to be more costly. This will show more problems. Tickets has a little bit more flesh on it because I use this as a prototype component, so I have methods on here that I don't need or I'm not using at this point. But I'm going to leave them there because it, again, for this purpose, it works as a check or a validation. Okay, so we have private GUID and identifier. Private string, customer name. That again will change as well because ultimately I want to have in the ticket system, we'll have a database. I'm doing it. I'm becoming a PM. You'll have a table, or at least the structure of the ability to add customers and define customers. Customers don't necessarily mean very much other than tracking beyond the ticketing. Ticketing, you want contact details of customers, you want to be able to get in touch with them. They might subscribe to notifications on there. So ticketing has a different use case for that. Whereas when you get to actual stories, you don't want necessarily your customers to have direct access to that or have, much more than just a name attached to it. So you might have a source. It came from a customer, therefore, it does add some value to knowing it's not just a made-up feature that someone's trying to make work for. But doing it this way does allow me that flexibility where I can kind of put that information in there. And a ticket doesn't necessarily have a title. A ticket has a customer and then what the problem is. Into the tooling. Private date time, review date. Private status. Okay, so like I said, this is the one that's going to test me because this is a bigger component of the system overall so far. So I've already kind of done some of the work here, right? Where I've created this new ticket and whatnot. So let's do that. And then can you do 2 lower? Edit. It's got to be a keyboard macro or something that does lower. Come on, there's got to be something. I know I could have done it by now. Just learning. Macros. Oh. I'm most disappointed because there is a keyboard sequence you can press to uppercase something. What's nice? Folding. Control Shift U. Look, toggle the case. There we go. Thank you, Tick. Appreciate it. I know I could have done it by the time I get that. Hey, Nicholas, how are you doing? There is search all. Yeah, I could have found a replace of some form, but yeah. Control Q. Gotcha. Okay. So, like I said, this is probably going to break more than I intend. It doesn't, that's amazing. There we go. Tickets application, there we go. So after all that refactoring, I haven't changed these yet. Yeah. So just decided that I was going to start adding this keyword. I must have been experimenting with the design of objects to see how I felt about them, right? This is a good way of saying, hey, when you're constructing this object and using the get setters, then you have to use this. I'm going to get rid of that now because, well, private string tenant. Oh. Funny, I don't use the keyboard as much as I should do. It's not as powerful on the whole key press stuff. That's because I have no memory for it, pretty much. Like column selects and stuff, those are things that I've only recently started using pretty strongly. Five things, I'm just looking on mobile. If you get better, let's repeat a feeling of the weather all the time. Don't recommend. Yeah, I appreciate it. If I sound even remotely like this tomorrow, I probably would skip the stream. But we'll see. I'm going to drink some more tea today. Yeah, I know I'm not the quietest of people normally, but it's definitely tripping me up. So I apologise for anyone if I have sniffled and I've not realised that I'm doing it down the microphone. I try. But appreciate the look because. Okay. Ticket is changed. Ticket note. Let's do this. Ticket ID. What the heck was I doing? Oh, idiot. It's a ticket ID. I was looking at it thinking it was ticket, and then I realized I'm looking at ticket note. I apologize. I shouldn't have not outburst then. I have to be more mindful. I don't like. That's an easy mistake. People make those mistakes. Public virtual ticket. I'm going to put this in place for right now. Entity framework is normally smart enough to be able to associate the fact that I'm looking for ticket and I've got a thing called ticket ID, so it can do that association. You don't have to explicitly state it. I'm going to put that in there, and when I need it, I'll come back around on it. Because I bet it will break. Ultimately, what I might want to do is allow add ticket note to exist in the ticket, which means that you have to have loaded the ticket to add ticket note. You can't just add a note randomly. Because there's never a reason for just loading a ticket note necessarily. Or just adding a ticket note. So some patterns here that I'm intrigued to know how they. Do I have to guard against everything? No, not really. What I should be doing is, as I'm writing the code, I want to figure out how to guide a developer picking up this code base with very little guidance. How do I get them into the code base and become productive? That's what I should be focusing on. These are intended to make sure that is going forward possible. So these changes are not meant just for the sake of, hey, I can make these changes, because I don't fancy doing this every couple of days. And so, hi, welcome. Hope you are well. Okay, so let's fix up the application before I go. Yeah, let's fix up the application. I don't want to make a commit there. The others didn't have massive impact. These have impact. okay, so obviously I can't do it this way anymore, right? I can't set them. So maybe now is the time when I actually need to do the ticket. Add the ticket through here, because yeah, it's actually a good experiment point as well, because it's pretty simple to change later. So I can't do it this way anymore because I've now made sure you can't just set these variables. I also have hidden everything, right? You can't construct an instance of this right now because I've not even provided a create method on this thing. I wonder if I'm going to test some just from a learning. I want to make sure. So, right. Huh. I'm going to test something. Because they're in different assemblies. So if I put internal ticket note, int ticket ID, string content, period user identifier, right? I do ticket ID equals ticket ID, ticket ID, content equals content, user, right? Not unused. So now in here, I still can't do that, right? Because I can't still create a note. I'm just trying to, again, I'm trying to think about the design here. I'm trying to think about how do I want these things to work? So adding a ticket note, I believe is the responsibility of a ticket, not a note unto itself, right? So if you need to add a note to the system, you can only do it through the ticket itself. So what I'm thinking here is this gets a method, and this is where we kind of straddle the line of behavior in these objects. But I'm actually attaching an object to this thing, but this is also creating that thing. So that's where I'm not sure it's a good design, but let's follow it through. Right? I can always review things later, right? So if the ticket has a note collection, then here I can say notes dot add, right? New ticket note. Now, because I'm internal, I can do this. That's content. So I can create an instance in here because I've used the internal constructor, right? I haven't done this before, by the way. It's not a style I would normally do, right? So now this add note for ticket, and this code is all temporary, right? Again, it was prototype stuff. So changing this code doesn't really cost me in the long term because I'm going to have to change it all anyway because it's not specific, it's not correct. But now I need a ticket repository, not a ticket note repository, right? So now I say var ticket equals await ticket note repository to get my ID async. Is that actually a thing on there? I suppose it is, right? And then I can say ticket.add note. And I can just say command.content and command.userIdentifier, right? That's actually created by user or added by user. Yeah. again, that user identifier means nothing there. I want to say that this is who added it, not just that it's a variable. And then I should just be able to do wait. If ticket is null, return result.conflict. If I have unit tests around this, I've just broken them all, but it's fine. Right. So, often that's called ticket repository. Is that better? I think it is. I think it is better. Because now you can't add a note to the system just randomly against a ticket. You have to do it against the note itself. It does come into this world of there's now some behavioral aspects on this, whereas previously it's just changing the state of this object. This is actually, again, single responsibility, ownership. Everything is definable, right? What is one thing, if you consider one thing? So I'm going to leave it in place because it's a worthwhile experiment. At the end of the day, I have to live with the code. So I have to understand my decisions, and I think that is a logical one. And I can't separate right now the database from the domain object itself, so they are one and the same. But we'll live with it. Okay, so var tenant equals, this should be a switch, create right. That's what that should become. Oh, at all. We didn't create it, right? So, how have that much information on it? Don't care about that. Update tenant. This is in tickets. What did I have that as before? They added. Okay, so it was they added. Okay, I get it. So this is slightly different in that this is actually setting. So this is tenant period. So by default, obviously, entity base creates a tenant and new GUID, but I'm actually setting it for the first time here. So my implementation here is I actually know this, so which is okay because this object in this instance, in the tenant in the ticket system, is not the same tenant as the tenant in the tenant system, right? Again, source of truth. The tenant that exists in the tenant management system is the tenant. This is a copy of that data, and I do need to take on that same identifier. So public static tenant create, and there we go. So update tenant, that should now work. And again, this is why I'm doing this. This actually demonstrates exactly why I'm doing this, right? So the name changes, right? Now in this system, I'm not going to fire too many events on other objects, right? Because this is an object that this system owns, so events matter. This is a system that is just data, but I've used entity base because it still fits, right? I still have an identifier, I still have an ID. Every object has an identifier. Right? Should I still follow that pattern? is there any cost to doing it this way, right? I'm not going to do anything on this, right? So I'm just thinking out loud through my thought process. That's all I'm doing right now, just to make sure I'm not so I don't have any events, but that doesn't mean that having this way doesn't introduce a weird inconsistency in the way the system works, right? You'd have to understand at a glance, this is an object owned by the system. But if I was assigning you the work and you said, okay, well, you're going on the ticket system, so you work in that world, you might not know that that object isn't a primary object, right? So the patterns aren't apparent. If the patterns are different, then you're trained differently to use the code base. So what we need is update tenant name. And for right now, we don't need to do anything, right? Why did I call that tenant name? Right, we don't need to do anything. But again, it's explicit. If we need to put any eventing in here, we can do now. We have one way of doing it, not two ways of doing it. So this just becomes update tenant name. And even that's redundant because it's on the tenant, so update name. So yes, I've just created a method where I could just use a property setter. But now that method is explicit about what I'm doing. And also, if I do put a domain event in there, then the rest of the system doesn't need to change. So if I update the tenant name in other places, right, if something else triggers this or whatever, then it's wrapped up in one place. I don't have to worry about changing everywhere else. So I can't randomly change it. That's the purpose. Okay, so that works. Tenant users could be the same thing, right? Go in here. I need a tenant private tenant user. String name, period, identifier. Again, the word user there is redundant. I don't need to use it. That is my identifier. Tenant identifier does need specifying. Tenant user. Hold on, there's a reason I did it this way. Yes. This object itself has its own ID, therefore its own identifier. This kind of comes back around on what I was talking about before, right? If I have the identifier, when I'm in the user interface for this, right, I'll only have my user identifier. That's my global user identifier, not the specific one. So I'll have this identifier all the time. Only this plus this tells me which tenant I'm actually, the tenant I'm logged into right now, plus my user identifier, is this record. So why do I have another identifier? Alright. Again, I'll review that later. Right now, I don't want to break this. I want to make sure that this is I can review it after the fact. So public static tenant user. Again, if you're new to the stream, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, please feel free. I'm not saying that I'm perfect developer. I may be doing things that you don't do or things that are new to you. I'm happy to share, happy to discuss. This project itself is not open source, but we do have one that I have. I work on a couple of days a week. Water, drink water. That's the repository. Yesterday we were adding Blazor WebAssembly UI to it, so you can log in and log our first consumption of water. So building the API out there, going through it in a very rough manner, deliberately to go through and do something like this where we're talking about the greater design. More simplistic than this, less moving parts, fewer moving parts to be accurate. So, in general, a much more manageable project if you're trying to actually follow along with code. Next Friday, I will be doing a coding challenge. There is a voting, a poll in the Discord channel for coding challenges. So the idea there is the viewers can vote against which coding challenge they'd like to see me take on. And then on the day of the stream, I don't review beforehand. I just pick up the coding challenge, look at it in real time, and develop. Apparently that's actually kind of useful for some people. They like the process. They like to see my thought process. I've been developing for a long time, so I have a different perspective on how to write software. So that's there if you would like to contribute. Okay, so let me finish this up. So we need a create, some design challenge there, but yeah. So .create, we need name, identifier. There we go. That's why. Why would I want? Why is the identifier passed in here? It's the identifier of the tenant user. I probably don't need this. I'm solving a different problem there, but for right this second, I'm going to put that back. And we'll, right now I need it to work. So that goes there. We don't need date time added. That's again, doing it that way would be useful because we have if we wanted to control the date time stuff. On that, welcome. Why do you prefer IntelliJ over Microsoft Visual Studio for C#? So this is Rider. So yeah, IntelliJ based, obviously. I've been a big fan of it since I started using it, to be honest. It just feels quicker. Visual Studio has come along in leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. This is very focused, whereas Visual Studio is very general. There's a lot of different stuff in there. It's a heavy application. But at this point, it's just I've kind of got used to the tooling and I'm comfortable using it. There's things that this does that are better. I like the debugging experience inside of Rider. It's a much cleaner experience for me. I like the management of the projects and stuff. It is pretty good. So when it comes to starting up all these services and restarting the services, it's a much cleaner interface. The debugging itself is pretty nice, and the ability to break these services down and see all the logs and stuff is quite a clean interface. So it's mainly the features around the language that the challenge. Now, if I'm doing Blazor stuff, Visual Studio still has done a better job of doing live reload. So that definitely has some advantages there. So if I'm doing Blazor, I probably do have Visual Studio open. Yeah. There's also, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, the JetBrains licensing is way more approachable than Microsoft's. So, I was okay. I had the MSDN subscription, and I could access VMs, and I could access the images and stuff, licenses. But that was all that I added. Obviously, using the professional edition. I have I actually subscribe to the full Rider, the JetBrains toolbox. I have access to all their tooling, which is kind of nice. And it's not expensive at all. It's cost me $170 a year. And I can, if I want to do, Rust development, I can download Rust Rover and test with that. I can download Fleet, WebStorm, PHP Storm, all the memory tools, etc. are there. So yeah. Anyway, remote development is something I want to look at. Do you know off the top of your mind if you need to get a VS license when you're making money immediately or after? It's on the threshold. The Visual Studio Community Edition, I think, is something high, like $1 million or something. It's easy to find. But yeah, if you're developing professional software, and I personally feel that is a really good way to do it. And I'm glad Microsoft went that path. We were talking the other day about tooling. So if you're doing, like, you want visual components of stuff, only SyncFusion is the only company I know of that offers something similar, where they offer that community license that has UI controls that will meet all your needs, and they're fully available until you hit a revenue threshold. So, yeah, so you're fully able to make, commercial software with Visual Studio Community if you're not making too much money. So we're going to put a method on here. Oh crap, 905. Update name. We'll fix this one, and then I'll review. Got update name. And again, I don't have any events here, but it does wrap this up nicely. So I kind of like doing it. Okay. So I'm going to finish up there. I'll do the rest of this stuff off stream. Actually less. I think I might have done some refactoring that's actually lessened this impact. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's more rinse and repeat. But I'll finish the rest of this off stream so that I can continue with features tomorrow. Assuming that I don't actually have a full blown code at that point. I really like SyncFusion, but they were very rigid with next to zero customization we done to them. The styling is a little harder. Yeah. But if you're looking for a commercial set of tools to get an application up and running with that looks the part, has tables, buttons, pop-ups, etc., the SyncFusion controls you can go into production with them if you wanted to without major cost, which the others do not offer. Like if you want to use other tools, it's not worth it. I like MudBlazer, just felt like enough customization for me. Yeah, but MudBlazer doesn't work very well. Their documentation's horrible. And they're missing things. And I was upset over that one. And I was trying to read the manual. I was. Unicus, good morning. How are you doing? Yeah. But, if a set of tools works and it does its job for you, then that's perfect, right? That's kind of what you need. Yeah, I couldn't get it working in .NET. There was all sorts of issues. I couldn't get the menu layout to work. The collapse was working funky. The layout was not working properly. It wasn't triggering events unless I moved things into nested components, which then completely broke the layout. So, yeah, I get into all sorts of mess with that. So again, if you are interested in the Discord, there is the votes on the coding challenge that will pick up next Friday. At this point, it looks like. I don't believe there's any reason why that can't happen at this point. Yeah. That is the only other thing. So the coding challenge, I've picked 3 out. There is a coding challenges channel in the Discord. Yeah. Also coming in February, by the way, I do have my I did order the prompter, Elgato. So I'll have that. So looking at the camera and reading chat will be a little bit more natural, hopefully. So I've got to figure out some rearranging of things, which normally means I screw up the microphone again. So, okay. Well, I've made solid progress on this today. The app feels like it's going in a better place. After this, I will be working on that internal API component, and we can discuss more about what this means, right? What are the implications of having this internal API from tickets to planning items? So ultimately, once I've got that first promotion done, that will answer a lot of questions, allow me to understand a little bit more about what I want from the data in the system, right? So this whole promotion of a ticket to a planning item is going to be incredibly challenging. From an API perspective, the idea would be a ticket triggers a promotion. That planning item then has a source, right? There's a source ticket identifier. That ticket identifier is then I can then look at the information for that ticket. So when I look at the planning item, I can pull the information from the ticket. Right, that's the goal. Right, it's not like a copy. I'm debating whether I actually store the ticket information in the planning item data store, or whether I have a global data store that consumes things and I can query for relevant information. So kind of this layout doesn't really do much justice, but in general, everything below here, too bad, right? Everything under here would be the web layer, so I'd be querying off this as well, or viewing it. Probably better to have reference so you don't have to duplicate a long thread of comments that go with the ticket. Well, that's kind of why I'm debating the design there a little bit, because initially my thought was I publish and then consume when I care about something, start consuming events about it, right? Rather than consume them all the time. But if I have one data store that everything's getting consumed into and stored in a meaningful way, then I can query that data store from each of these and say, hey, get me the planning item, get the ticket details for this planning item just by requesting the ticket. And I have that view then. Because the UI for this, I think, is going to be backed off this data store rather than individual databases, which does allow me to keep things fast and make them query specific. However, it is 9:10. I have overrun a little bit. I will return tomorrow. I will have this finished up so that I don't have to do more refactoring on stream tomorrow. We will tackle that internal API concept. So right now the goal is an internal API purely to make this work, because then I can swap it out later for a more robust system. We can talk about why that's less robust at that point. So, hi Jables, how are you doing? Thank you for popping in. Hope you're well. This is why I don't play games much anymore, by the way. I've been really trying to focus on getting this bill out. So I'm trying to be strict about any gaming time. So, okay. So I'm going to get this tidied up. I'm going to start trying to make some more charts to explain. No idea what you're talking about most of the time, but it looks cool and want to support. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is going to take a while. So, yeah. So I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to raid out to Captain Coder again. That was a fun raid again, because I'm overrunning. I do need to say I cannot hang around, so I got to go run and take some dogs for a walk. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow. We'll do more of this. If you are interested, please join the Discord. Also check out YouTube. All the videos go up there, and I do plan on making more content there. Manga Scraper. No, I'd like to hear more about that one. But thank you all. I will see you again soon. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.